On June 17, 1972, 5 men were arrested for breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. The men were found carrying cameras, bugging equipment, and thousands of dollars in cash. Initially, the break-in was dismissed as a third-rate burglary by the White House. However, as reporters began to dig deeper, it became clear that this was no ordinary crime. The burglars were connected to President Richard Nixon's re-election campaign, and the White House was actively trying to cover up its involvement. The Watergate break-in marked the beginning of a scandal that would rock the nation and ultimately bring down a president. It was a complex and convoluted affair, with a cast of characters that included White House officials, political operatives, and shadowy figures from the intelligence community. At the center of it all was Richard Nixon, a president obsessed with secrecy and determined to hold on to power at any cost. The break-in itself was a bungled affair. The burglars were caught red-handed, and their connections to the White House were quickly exposed. However, Nixon and his aides were determined to contain the damage. They lied to the public, obstructed justice, and destroyed evidence in a desperate attempt to cover up their crimes. The Watergate scandal was a watershed moment in American history. It exposed the dark underbelly of American politics and showed that even the most powerful man in the world is not above the law. The scandal also led to significant reforms in campaign finance laws and government transparency. The Nixon administration's attempts to cover up its involvement in the Watergate break-in were extensive and ultimately futile. The cover-up began almost immediately after the burglars were arrested, with White House officials working to buy their silence and obstruct the FBI's investigation. One of the key figures in the cover-up was John Mitchell, Nixon's former attorney general and the head of his re-election campaign. Mitchell authorized the break-in and other illegal activities, and he worked tirelessly to keep the truth from coming out. Other key players in the cover-up included H.R. Haldeman, Nixon's chief of staff, John Ehrlichman, Nixon's domestic affairs advisor, and Charles Colson, Nixon's special counsel. The cover-up began to unravel when the burglars went on trial in January 1973. One of the burglars, James McCord, sent a letter to the judge presiding over the trial, claiming that he had been pressured to remain silent about the White House's involvement. McCord's letter blew the lid off the cover-up and led to a series of bombshell revelations that would consume the Nixon presidency. As the cover-up unraveled, Nixon became increasingly isolated and paranoid. He lashed out at his critics, accusing them of being part of a vast, left-wing conspiracy to destroy him. He also became more and more reliant on a small group of loyal aides who were willing to do whatever it took to protect him. While the Nixon administration was busy trying to cover up its crimes, 2 young reporters at the Washington Post were busy uncovering the truth. Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein were assigned to cover the Watergate break-in, and they quickly realized that there was more to the story than met the eye. Woodward and Bernstein were relentless in their pursuit of the truth. They cultivated sources within the government, including a mysterious informant known as Deep Throat, who provided them with crucial information about the scandal. Deep Throat's identity remained a secret for over 30 years, until he was revealed to be Mark Felt, the former associate director of the FBI. Woodward and Bernstein's reporting on Watergate was groundbreaking. They exposed the Nixon administration's lies and cover-ups, and they helped to bring down a president. Their work also helped to usher in a new era of investigative journalism, in which reporters were no longer content to simply report on what the government told them. Section 4. The Tapes. Nixon's Undoing. In July 1973, it was revealed that Nixon had secretly recorded all of his conversations in the Oval Office. These tapes, if they could be obtained, would provide irrefutable evidence of Nixon's involvement in the Watergate cover-up. Nixon fought tooth and nail to keep the tapes secret, claiming that they were protected by executive privilege. However, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that Nixon had to turn over the tapes. When the tapes were finally released, they were even more damning than anyone had imagined. The tapes revealed that Nixon had been involved in the cover-up from the very beginning. He had authorized hush money payments to the Watergate burglars, and he had obstructed justice by trying to derail the FBI's investigation. The tapes also showed that Nixon was a deeply flawed man, prone to paranoia, racism, and anti-Semitism. Section 5. The Senate Hearings, A Nation Transfixed. In the spring of 1973, the Senate Select Committee on Presidential Campaign Activities, chaired by Senator Sam Ervin of North Carolina, began holding televised hearings on the Watergate scandal. The hearings captivated the nation, as millions of Americans tuned in to watch a parade of witnesses testify about the Nixon administration's crimes. One of the most dramatic moments of the hearings came when John Dean, Nixon's former White House counsel, testified that Nixon had been personally involved in the Watergate cover-up. Dean's testimony was corroborated by other witnesses, and it became clear that Nixon was in serious legal jeopardy. The Senate hearings were a turning point in the Watergate scandal. They showed that the scandal was not just a third-rate burglary, as Nixon had claimed, but a far-reaching conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. The hearings also helped to erode public support for Nixon, as more and more Americans came to believe that he was guilty of obstruction of justice and other crimes. Section 6. Resignation and Pardon, the End of an Era. Faced with impeachment by the House of Representatives and conviction by the Senate, Nixon resigned from office on August 9, 1974. He was the first and only president in American history to do so. In his resignation speech, Nixon admitted to making mistakes but insisted that he had never obstructed justice. He also expressed his hope that the nation could come together and move on from the Watergate scandal. Nixon's resignation did not end the Watergate saga. On September 8, 1974, his successor, President Gerald Ford, pardoned Nixon for any crimes he may have committed while in office. Ford's pardon was highly controversial, and it is still debated today. Section 7. Watergate's Legacy, a turning point in American history. The Watergate scandal had a profound impact on American politics and society. It led to a loss of faith in government, as many Americans came to believe that their leaders were corrupt and untrustworthy. The scandal also led to a number of reforms, including the creation of the Independent Counsel Law and the strengthening of campaign finance laws. The Watergate scandal also had a lasting impact on journalism. It showed the power of investigative reporting to hold the powerful accountable, and it inspired a new generation of journalists to pursue careers in investigative journalism. The Watergate scandal was a dark chapter in American history, but it also had a positive side. It showed that the American system of government, though flawed, is ultimately capable